Okay, welcome. Thank you very much for coming from so far away and meeting here in this amazing place where it all started. Where I met the practice of the Nei Tsang with Master Chia and started to research together with him the origin of the pulse and how the pulses work in our bodies in connection with the organs, in connection with our vital energy. So over several years, after a lot of Nei Tsang practice, we started to realize that the most important thing in Nei Tsang is to bring more qi, more blood to the organs, the vital organs, and to allow the physiological functions of the body to free themselves up so that the qi can really circulate. So it goes both ways, because also the energy, when there's a blockage, the energy helps the blood to flow. The qi pushes the blood and allows the blood to go where it needs to go, but the blood carries the qi to where the body needs it, where the cells need it. So there's this connection between the physical body and the energy body that is very powerful in the Nei Tsang. So does everyone know already Nei Tsang a little bit? You are familiar already with this massage. So you've either perhaps received it here in Tao Garden with a therapist, or you have perhaps studied it and learned from practitioners around the world. So this branch, what we call life pulse massage, is already included in the Nei Tsang, as we have always practiced it, but we just put a focus on the aspect dealing with the pulses, dealing with how blood flows in the body and how we can use that blood flow, use the power of the pulse, the suction power and the expansion power of a pulse to increase more qi and more energy and more blood flow in the organs and in the body. So focusing on what is blood already, what does it do? Why do we need it? What is its function in our body? It's a substance that's it's our essence in a way. We can say that it really contains the ingredients for our survival. So it has the nourishing aspect, it has the protection aspect with the immune system, of course, and then it has the how do we eliminate the different toxins that accumulate either from the outside environment or from our own digestive process or the cellular regeneration process, which generates a lot of toxins as well. And then there's the warmth. What is, having the warmth in our body so that the cells and the tissues are sufficiently supple and flexible so that the breath and the qi can actually circulate fully. So the blood brings us many things. And the main thing also is that, as I said before, it's the vehicle of our qi. It's the yin essence, the yin matter, the substance that allows our energy to stay in our body and to be used in our body, so that we can do everything that we need to do. Whatever our mind is thinking, we can go, okay, I can do that. So thanks to our body, nourished by the blood. So the pulses are a key part of how the blood moves from one place to another. In our health, the pulses are going to help the heart do its job. So you could say that the heart is the fundamental pulse. It's always doing its job. It never stops. So it's always either sucking in the blood, the return blood from the body where it's just been used, and propulsing it into the lungs where it will be mixed with the oxygen. So taking in the nourishment from the outside world, and then regenerated and repropulsed again by the major arteries of our entire body back out into even the smallest part of our capillaries of where the cells are needing nourishment, needing support, needing protection in every part of our bodies. So the heart is at the center of this action. It's the most yang organ in the sense that it never stops. And so this first pulse needs help because it's doing a big job. I mean, it has to, the blood has to get from this part of the body all the way down, to a very small part of the body and all the way back up again, or out or into the brain, which is very vast. So to have help, the heart needs to count on all the different pulses, what we call the master pulses in the body, which will act like step-up transformers, as Master Chia likes to use this analogy, which we use in electronics, for example, where you have a charge being sent out, and then the pulse will receive that charge. For example, the aorta pulse will receive the blood from the heart, and in turn, it will also do a physical movement of a contraction and dilation to propulse the blood to the next step, down to the femoral pulses, for example. And then they will receive the blood and do their sort of a pumping action, the suction and a dilation action that will propulse the blood to the next step, down into the knees, into the ankles, to the feet. And then at the same time, of course, this is all getting gathered and propulsed up through the master pulses of the brachial plexus and the arms, the hands, and then, of course, up by the carotid pulses and the brain, so that the whole body is actually working as a team together as one pulse, ideally, and that each of these pulses work in synchronicity and are working at the same rhythm, at the same beat as that of the heart, so that it's all being orchestrated and moving, ideally. But that's ideally, because in normal life, we have stress, we have emotion, we have something that happens, and then we're like, and something tenses up, and something else becomes very rigid, and something else stops. And so little by little, these pulses get desynchronized, because the fascia, the connective tissue that's holding these pulses in their place, holding the arteries and helping the blood to move, starts to either slow down or literally stop. When we really have a stone in our gut, the circulation literally stops, because our mind is focused on something that is sending a message to our body that says, oh, okay, wait, put everything on hold. So these pulses start to get desynchronized, and they're all pulsing at different rates, at very slow or very stopped rates, or too much. So whether it's a sympathetic or parasympathetic response, this will control the vegetative process, as we call it. It's really like a living vegetation, like we're a living tree, and we're receiving so many messages and having to react constantly and adjust to every situation. So our pulses reflect all of what's happening. So easily, the body gets sick as soon as these pulses slow down and stop for some reason. The blood may only be going, of course, it's always going through the heart in some way, but the heart maybe is working halfway, or only with a little bit of help from the other pulses. And so little by little, we will have blockages that will crystallize, and the toxins will start to accumulate in certain parts, and especially in the organs, of course, but also in the spine and in all the places of the body. And so this will start to create an environment where the bacteria and the viruses get happy, where they will start to feed on the dead cells, that are no longer getting the nourishment and the protection and the cleansing that normally they would be getting when the blood flow is fully active. So this is the importance. I mean, it's a fundamental life and death issue of making sure that your pulse and all your pulses are activated to their full potential as much as possible, to come back to that full flow. So of course this is very connected with our nervous system and with all the other systems in the body. So using the life pulse massage, or using this technique as part of your Nei Tsang or as part of any other body work that you might be doing, is highly beneficial, because it will give you a deeper understanding of how to create a global balance in someone, and really help them to get back to their self-healing process, getting the blood doing its job properly. So let me just go through a few images here. I'm going to just explain a little bit Okay, so we have the different systems of the blood. So the capillaries, that's the smallest part of our circulatory system. So we go from the heart, which is the big muscle, and the temple, if we will, of where the blood is going to be moved around, oxygenated, deoxygenated, recycled in a certain sense. And so from this big center, it has to go all the way out into the very smallest parts through the capillaries, where there's that's the other place, the other end of the circulatory system where the exchange happens, just like in the heart, between the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. So the return blood and the oxygenated blood that we will use. Sorry, I'm showing on my computer, but I have to show up here to get used to it. So, okay. In any case, so each capillary system, which we have at the tips of any of our fingers, in any of our organs are basically full of capillaries. That's mostly what they have. They generally have one or two arteries that nourish each of our vital organs, and the rest is just what we call microcirculation, which is the capillary circulation, which is tiny, smaller than one hair. It's a tenth of each of our hairs. It's so small. So small that only one cell can get through it at a time. So that's very small. So imagine if one cell gets blocked, if the capillary gets blocked somewhere, then we get the sticky blood syndrome. That means that if one blood cell cannot pass through a capillary, that means that no more blood can get through there. And you just have to have any kind of stress or tension or toxin buildup, and that will block the capillaries. It's so easy to block the capillaries, and yet our whole health is based on our capillary circulation. So it's so important to keep the capillaries, that microcirculation, as we call it, as free as possible. So that's the other end of our heart beating. It's not just our heartbeat that's important. It's the capillary, this very subtle sort of breathing, pulsing process that's happening in our extremities and especially in our vital organs. So using the Life Pulse flushing techniques will help to really increase the microcirculation. This is one of the main objectives of these techniques. Okay, so how the capillaries and the heart work together. I won't go into the great details, but so here you have a nice image of the different types of cells that make the blood. So we have the red blood cells. That's what the little donuts, the red donuts, which carry the hemoglobin, which attract the oxygen and store it, and then redistribute the oxygen to the cells wherever they might need it. And so, then the little sort of spiky guys in the middle there, those are the white blood cells, who are in charge of the defense system, of the protection system, and who are there to absorb the toxins or any, the bacteria or virus or whatever's trying to attack the system. They're going to be doing their job and absorbing and gathering that into the lymph. So you see there's like a yellow liquid that all of that is flowing in, which is like a mixture of what we call plasma, but also the lymph, which is part of the blood and yet separate from the blood. They're two separate systems, but they work closely together as the protection system for our body. So where the blood goes, the lymph goes, and vice versa. Okay, so these are the main cells of our body that we need, that are part of the blood, that we need in order to function. They're the nourishing, protecting, cleansing aspects. So here you see the inside of a capillary and how one red blood cell has to squeeze its way through into one capillary. And yet that capillary is what is nourishing our vital organs, our skin, our bones, our muscles. So you see how small that can really get. And how if you just have one blockage, it can really mess up a lot of things. So then the stem cells also are extremely important because they're produced by the blood marrow, the bone marrow principally, and they can also transform into new blood cells whenever we need them. So as blood cells are recycling, getting destroyed, or changing form, then these stem cells will come up from the marrow of our bones and literally rebuild whatever needs to be rebuilt in the body. They can transform into any other cell and so regenerate. So that also is very important to keep their circulation going so that the blood flow is free. So here we see the interaction there again between the capillaries and the return blood and the arterial blood, how the three sort of protectors, nourishers, rebuilders, regenerators work together. These three systems that bring the liquids of our body, the nourishing and protective liquids, into each of our tissues, into each of our organs, and how they all work by osmosis in a certain sense. So it's very important that these tiny little vessels are as free as possible. Okay, so there's many. Okay, so that's the main thing that's important. So this is a diagram of the 52 pulse points that we found in the entire global body. There's 52, as you will, meeting points where the pulses come together and contract and dilate in order to send the blood to the next level. So we need all of these 52 points in order to really be sure that the blood is getting everywhere where it needs to go. So we have the front of the body and the back of the body, of course. There's another chart for the back of the body. So that was the arterial blood, and this is the venous blood, the return blood, which is also part of the whole process. So the idea is it's difficult to work on the venous blood because its pulse is very, very slow. It's more a pooling effect. Whereas the arterial pulse, we can work on it directly because there's a real movement of contraction, dilation. There's a suction happening. There's something physical and more muscular that we can actually work with using pressure, using what we call a vascular compression. So I'll be getting into that. That's the main point that we use in this technique. So the return blood will return naturally when we've really worked on the arterial pulse correctly. If we've really made a good compression and created a good vacuum, that will pull the propulse the arterial blood, which will pull in turn the venous blood back to where it needs to go as well. So there's a real an orbit that's being created actually inside the circulatory system that we're helping with these manual techniques. Okay, so this is the basic principle. So here, what you have here is an artery. One picture, you have the artery that's blocked with plaque. That happens very easily from the food that we eat, from any kind of toxic buildup with the emotions, any bad habits that we may have that create stagnation in the blood flow. So whatever the blood is carrying that might be toxic or wasteful will start to build up on the inside of the walls of our arteries, which are like a tube. And so the yellow part that you see on top there is what we call the buildup. And so little by little, the artery is only able to let pass a tiny little bit of blood at a time. The blood flow diminishes, can be very, very diminished with stress and with this type of buildup. And so what happens if the blood flow is diminished? We already saw that it really cuts off the food supply, the protection supply, the waste removal supply, etc., and the rebuilders. So it's really our vital essence that we're cutting ourselves off from every time we block an artery or a capillary in our body. So what we want to do is use the body's natural circulatory process, which is working with internal pressure, the game of higher and lower pressure that creates, like the climate around us, a vacuum, an internal vacuum that will attract a flow. So this is one drawing which is very, very well explained. It's as simple as when you have a garden hose and you've got water flowing through it. And so you have a good flow, and then somebody walks on the hose or presses on the hose, and all of a sudden you have a diminished water flow. So much less water is flowing. But at the same time, what's actually happening is if you're doing it intentionally, and you're pressing on an artery or on a water hose, you're diminishing what's flowing beyond it, but actually what's behind where you're pressing is you're building up more water, more blood. Okay, so this is interesting. And then when you release the pressure, that built up pressure is going to flow through and flush out whatever was in front of where you were pressing. So this is what's called the flushing technique, pressing and flushing technique. So we can use this fundamental flushing technique to actually direct the blood wherever it is we need to go. So if we're pressing on a place that's blocked, and we build up more blood above where we're pressing, and then we release the pressure, the blood is going to go and flush out whatever the toxin, whatever waste has built up on the other side of that point. So it seems very simple. It is, but it can go a long way. And you can really apply this technique in your Nei Tsang or in any kind of body work to get into very deep tensions, very deep tangles where no other method could work. Because you're letting the blood do the untangling. The blood itself is actually doing the cleaning. And the change of pressure that you're creating inside the body is a very powerful one. Okay, so that's the flushing technique that we're going to be using. So, okay, so there's different steps. Ooh, so much information. Okay, I'm going to skip over a few things. Okay, so now I'm going to get more into the esoteric part of it, which is also as important, the energy work. And the pulse, where does it come from? So now I'm just going to ask you to rub your hands a little bit. Make your hands warm. And then use your smile. And see if you can send your smile into your heart and touch your heart. Touch your belly, and especially the navel. And just let your heart and your navel receive a smile, receive the warmth of your hands, and start connecting with your pulse, connecting with the beating of your heart. And just see, okay, where is this pulse actually coming from? In the energetic sense, where's the energy of my pulse coming from, ultimately? So if you have the beating of your heart, does everybody feel the beat of their heart, more or less? Okay, if anyone's not feeling it yet, because sometimes when you're very relaxed, you don't feel it. So what we can do is just activate. The first way of activating our pulse is the oldest and easiest way, the most natural way, what we do when we're babies, is we laugh. So just laughing a little bit into the heart, into the belly, and awakening the pulse. This is already a really good way of getting your heart, waking up your heart, waking up your pulse, activating your vital pulse. Because we're already doing what our heart is doing naturally, or what our arteries are doing naturally, contracting and expanding. A little phase, a little yin phase, a little yang phase. Some contract, relax. And so now you feel, okay, now breathe into your heart, into your navel, and just try to feel a little bit of a heart sound, opening up the throat, opening up the chest. Now do you feel your heartbeat maybe a little stronger, a little more present? Okay, so what we're going to try to do, I'm going to work you through a little bit the process later, but is the connection between the heartbeat and then the other pulses in your body. So the first pulse is going to be the navel pulse, what we call the original pulse in our belly. So why is this pulse our original pulse? So just try to think, okay, when we were still an embryo, a very small embryo, we were just being conceived, the first pulse was the pulse of our belly as it was finding its way through the lining of our mother's uterus and connecting to the wall of the uterine lining. It was through our navel that we started to grow the umbilical cord and the placenta, which surrounded us and allowed all of our cells to be nourished and grow. So our navel is our first pulse. It's our first mouth, our first connection to life. And it's very connected to the heart pulse. And we say in the Tao that actually the original pulse comes from the North Star. The North Star pulses directly in through our heart, in through our navel, and gives us that energy, the Ming, the light of our original pulse. And this original pulse actually beats before the physical heartbeat. When we are still embryos, it's only after 21 days of development that our heart physically develops and starts to beat. So how is our body pulsing? How is it functioning for the first 21 days of its life? It's from the original pulse that's coming in through the earth, through the North Star, through the meeting of the cells of our mother and father. Okay, so just feeling this pulse, smiling into this pulse and amplifying this pulse, feeling it warm. And feeling the pulse in our feet, connecting to the earth. So see if you can breathe into the heart. Use the heart sign and breathe down from the heart, all the way through your belly, down through the feet into the earth. And start feeling something pulsing between the feet and the earth. Feeling the earth pulse in your feet. Feeling your feet pulsing in the earth. Always breathing in from the third eye, in through the heart, and sending the energy of the pulse down into the pulses of your belly and your feet. So maybe some places is not so easy to feel, but we'll see that we'll do the treatment a little bit, so you'll see it will probably become more easy. Is everyone able to feel something pulsing inside? Yes? No? Yeah? Okay, good. Okay, so this is a very important part, to practice every day feeling one's own pulses and connecting with them. Connecting not only the physical heartbeat and the smiling of the heart, of course, but feeling the energy of how the pulse of your heart actually echoes throughout the 52 other pulses of your whole bodies. But just already starting just with the navel pulse and the feet pulse. And so this is, I like this drawing a lot. We worked a long time to connect that. Okay, so then, because each of the organs has its own pulse, so we'll be working on that as well. And what we do in the Canon Li also, amplifying the pulse. This is a really wonderful self-practice that we can do to help ourselves every day so that the blood really flows fully everywhere where we need it. Because the quality of our blood is what gives us our nutrition. If the blood is not full of nutrition, then the cells will not receive what they need. And that is all a part of how well it's circulating, the blood supply. Okay, so we have the different techniques of pumping the pulse, which I will show you. Now we get to the actual practice. Okay, so let's see, the master pulses, is this more or less the master pulses? Okay, maybe Sabine, maybe you can come now. So I give a very short demonstration, and then we do hands-on, where you can lie on the mats, and we will do a self technique, and then also you can do on each other. I will guide you through a practice. Okay, how are you?
Hi.
Okay, Okay, so what we want to see now is, so this connection from the heart beating and how it's going into the dantian, into the abdominal area, and nourishing each of the organs. So we have the organ pulses that are nourished by what we call the master pulses. The master pulses, I show on myself also, are the main pulses that are like the meeting points. So from the heart, we go down through the aorta, which is the main highway, the most important part of where the blood flows through the abdomen, then which branches out to each of the organs, to each part of the spine. And then from there, we go down, of course, to the naval pulse, which then branches down into the legs. So you can see it on the drawing quite easily. Where the branches flow. So from the heart, you have this very thick aorta, which divides into the two lines down through the legs. So the main master pulses will be the navel. From the heart, we go to the naval pulse, then the two femoral pulses, the brachial pulses in the shoulders, and the carotid pulses in the neck, which will irrigate the brain. Okay, so the whole aorta area is a key place, because it's from just this section between the navel and the solar plexus is the place where almost all the branches start that irrigate the entire abdomen. Even the sexual organs, surprisingly, are nourished from the arteries that come out from above the navel. So this is a very key point. That even when you want to work on the pelvic organs, working on the pulses here in the solar plexus is the way to attain the blood flow, even in the hip area, in the pelvic area. Okay, so the first, objective. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible so that then you can do also. So to feel, I just want to show one technique of connecting the heart to the navel pulse, which is what we just did on ourselves with the hands. But we're going to do it using the flushing technique. Okay, so I'll show it first and then you can do it. So just pressing down and opening the navel. So I'm going to spiral my fingers over the navel. You can do it over the clothes, it's not a problem. And hold the pulse. So holding the pulse means allowing the fingers, I'm doing it first with the fingers and then I'm going to do it with the elbow, to sink down until you feel the beating of the pulse in your fingers. So you have to find the pulse. But sometimes it's not so easy to find. It's a little bit blocked in some cases. Sabine, I'm very lucky, she has a good pulse, easy to find. Some people not so easy. So you have to do a little bit of what we call the dragon pulsing, which is rocking and clearing. So you rock and spiral and you clear the tissues around the area. So once it's cleared, so you press, release, and spiral. This is all we know already with the Nei Tsang, basic Nei Tsang. And then, slowly your fingers can start getting deeper and deeper in, and you'll be able to really feel your fingers are boom, 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 receiving the pulse. Like if you were standing next to me, you would see that my fingers are going, jung, jung, jung. They're being pushed up by the pulse, literally. So it's okay. There's not really any danger in this, except, of course, if people have any kind of medical condition with thrombosis, for example, if they have blood clotting, it's actually probably good for them, but it's better not to do this type of treatment because the clot could move into places where we don't necessarily, where we can't control what will happen. So I would say that's the main contraindication. But with most people, it's not a problem. Even with high blood pressure or low blood pressure, this type of technique can actually be very beneficial because it will decrease any kind of high blood pressure for sure. It will really help to lower the blood pressure. And for someone who has low blood pressure, well, it will actually stimulate and create better blood flow. So I'll talk about the applications. But just first the technique. So just feeling the flushing, so I'm pressing, and so it takes time, huh? You have to really get down, and because the idea is the artery is like a tube, and you want to press the tube so that it's almost closed. You need to get it so that it's going, you're practically blocking the pulse. Almost. Because you want to diminish, like when you press on a hose, you want to get the blood flow to be very diminished after you're pressing, but you want it to really build up as much as possible. So what I'm doing actually is by pressing on the navel, I'm building up more blood flow in the whole aorta area, and so the blood flow is now being forced to go into the arteries that are going into each organ. So by just pressing on the naval pulse, I'm actually already bringing more blood, more qi, into the organs, the vital organs of the solar plexus. And then, by connecting with the heart, I'm giving a little bit of a pressure on the heart. Okay, so now we're actually building up pressure between both of my hands. So we're getting more and more blood flowing here, which is where we most need it, is in the solar plexus, in this area. So as soon as I release, I'm actually creating like a suction. And as I release my fingers, more blood will suddenly will start to flow, and there will be the blood will pull its way out of the organs, and then start flowing down through the legs. And Sabina will feel it all the way down in her legs. So you're actually working on the entire body just from one point, one point at the navel. So this is why we call it original pulse, is the navel pulse, not because the entire body is connected to this area here. Okay, so that's to show you how that works. Then, of course, I'm just going to run through so that people have a global idea of how the system works. So you open the navel pulse, then what we do is open the master pulses in the aorta, the femoral pulse, that we connect with the femoral. So it's the same procedure. You can also use the elbow, of course, allowing the elbow to rest inside the pulse because you have a larger surface to work on. And so what I'm doing is compressing the artery against the femoral bone, pressing out just a little bit so that the artery is closing off, and that actually builds up the pulse to a certain degree. So now I'm bringing more blood, more qi into the whole pelvic area. So Sabine can really feel that it's irrigating the uterus, the bladder, the large intestine, small intestine, the bones of the hips, and I can also create a pressure above at the navel and double the effect. And so this will build up much more qi, much more blood in this area. And then as I release, this will create a suction and then a pulling down of the blood and a flushing out of the blood down the leg. So we can do this on both sides, of course. It's symmetrical. So I will work with the lower body first. So then I'll connect with this pulse. And then I'll connect with the different pulses. I just lift up your knee a little bit. So we have the pulse also behind the knee, for example. That would be the next step. So we would connect behind the knee with the navel pulse, or with the femoral pulse, whichever you feel is more weak. So then we start working now with the therapeutic aspects. So, okay, this worked well. This was a good connection. Maybe I'll do it on the other leg so they can see better. But for example, perhaps Sabine has a blockage here, or a pain, or like problems with arthritis, or any kind of circulatory problem, or even veins, popping or whatever, varicose veins. That's just because the return blood is not coming back properly back up to the heart, right? So we're going to stimulate the pulsing, stimulate the return blood by stimulating actually the arterial blood. So we can hold and maintain and press and flush the popliteal pulse, which I'm going to hold here, work with the femoral pulse, and create a connection. So actually this will bring much more blood flow here into the thigh area. So just by listening to the pulse, holding the pulse, pressing and compressing the pulse against the bone, getting to the root of the pulse, as we say, and then releasing, yeah, you can let go, then suddenly get more blood flowing through it. So this will really help with any kind of circulatory difficulties. And then you can work all the way down, so we can work with one leg at a time, then both legs, and then working with the segment by segment. So there's the pulses also in the ankle bone, for example, connecting the popliteal with the ankle pulse, or then with the sole of the feet pulse. So I can be working here as well. I'm sort of jumping around so that at least you get a general idea. Working with the plantar pulse, of course, is very powerful, because we're working, of course, with the energy at the same time. Of course, this is also the Yongshuan point, the bubbling spring. But right now, my intention is focused on the pulse, on getting the blood to flow. So we're connecting, so we're activating the pulse. I'm flushing, I'm pressing, compressing the pulse against the bone of the foot, then releasing, pressing, releasing. So it's like a pumping effect that's actually pulling the blood into the pulse and at the same time expelling it, pressing it back up. Okay, so of the 52 points, so this is to give you an idea of how you can work with the distal points, and then you can connect the foot point with the navel pulse, for example, to what we want to call balancing the pulse. Because it's one thing to activate it, now what we want is to balance it and to make sure that it's beating at the same rhythm as the heart, as the aorta, and as the original pulse. Because in this hand I might be feeling a pulse, and this hand I might be feeling, so this pulse, if there's any kind of blockage going on here, this pulse will not be as regular. So I will connect the two pulses together. Okay, so to feel that the foot, where there's a lack of circulation, we all have difficult circulation in the lower legs. So this is one very simple way. It's a principle. Of course, then you can integrate it into many other techniques. But when you have the principle, press, release, so alternating one hand, release, and pumping, and letting each hand send the blood from one to the other. And you get a powerful connection. So this really helps for somebody who was not able to feel the pulse in their feet, for example. You can really help someone to feel better their connection with the pulse of the earth, the pulse of their feet, by connecting their foot pulse to the navel pulse. And then, of course, therapeutically, if there's any problem here, this is a general connection, but then you can work on very specific points, where you think, okay, this person needs a little bit more here, and then you can connect many things and work with the pulses and let the blood do the work. So it's a very, very relaxing and very agreeable way to do the Nei Tsang. So this would be for the legs. Then for the arms, it's the same principle. You have the pulse point you would be working from the master pulse of the navel up to the brachial pulse, from the brachial pulse down to the cubital pulse, and then the radial pulse, palmar pulse, etc. for both arms, and then for the head as well, for the base of the skull. There's many pulses in the skull as well, for the temporal pulse, and then you have the facial pulse, the different places where you can activate the pulse to bring more blood into the brain, and so there you'll be working with the master pulse of the carotid. So it's just one thing very important with the neck pulse, the carotid pulse, never work on two at the same time because you cut off the blood supply to the brain. Don't want to do that, okay? So you work on one side and then on the other side. You can work on the different points, okay? And so you connect each of this together with the central pulse. always. So then little by little you'll be starting to feel a real harmony, a very, very deep harmony. Because in the Qigong, we work first with the breath, and then the breath pushes the blood. And then when you start feeling the qi really in the blood, that's when you know you're really into deep Qigong healing. Okay, so there's all the different points that one can work with. Okay, so that's for the global body. And then for the organs, it's very specific. So each organ, so that you understand the global picture, each organ has 2 pulses. So for example, here, this would be the spleen and the stomach and the pancreas, just under the rib cage. So each of these organs has its own blood supply, arterial blood supply. It's receiving blood from the heart directly through the aorta, which are like lots of little branches, and as we saw, go out into the micro, tiny, tiny little branches, which we call the capillaries. So the organs have their own pulse, but they also come from what we call a root pulse, which comes out directly from the stem of the aorta, and comes out and branches out. So what we want to do is work with the 2 pulses of each organ to bring a maximum amount of blood and qi to the organ. So we work with the aorta here. Okay, so now what I'm doing is rolling the aorta, literally rolling it like a tube, and loosening it from the spine, because it often gets stuck to the spine. Okay, so you need to really get it unstuck. That already takes quite a lot of work. And just by pressing, so we're going to open the root pulses of the organs, which all stem from this central area here. Just this tiny spot. And we can use the technique which Master Chia calls playing the flute. Very nice. So just by pressing one thumb on the aorta, another thumb, release, press, release, press, release, press, release. Voilà. And just allowing the pulse to start branching out, flooding out into the organs. Okay, so this is something you can do in both directions. Activating the root pulses of the organs, which stem from the aorta. So just going up and down like that with using pressure. So you can use the thumbs chasing each other this way, because there's always a pressure release. So it's actually compressing, creating a suction, compressing, creating a suction, compressing, creating a suction. So you're pumping more blood out into this whole area, which is where all the vital organs and the diaphragm, we will irrigate the diaphragm and bring much more blood and qi to the diaphragm. So then once we have done this chasing the thumbs technique, then we can start really working with the specific points of the organs. So for example, the splenic artery, which branches out on the left side of the aorta, I will try to visualize where it's coming from. So you will be able, you can't actually feel it, of course, because it's all like, rubbery in there. But you can, with experience and by studying, I made many drawings where you can see exactly where I show you where each artery comes out. So you will have specific points where you know that the root artery is coming from in relation to each organ. So I press on the root pulse of the stomach and spleen in the middle of the aorta. Okay, so I'm roughly on the root pulse. So I connect now the root pulse with the organ pulse here. So it's just like what we do in the Nei Tsang, where you are pumping the organs, except here we're not just pumping the organ, we're pumping the pulse of the organ. So we're compressing the root pulse. So I'm going to press, release. Okay, just by pressing and releasing the root pulse of the spleen, already you can see that the spleen is going. It's getting filled with blood and qi just by holding the pulse at its root. So I think this is the most efficient. I haven't met a better way to get more blood and qi into an organ, really. Of course, with doing the qigong, but actually this is even more precise and more. It goes really deep. So you press, and then with the other hand you start pumping. So we're just helping the body doing what it already does, but we're amplifying it, amplifying the capacity. So holding and pumping. And so, voilà, Sabine, you can just breathe normally. Eh? Mm-hmm. Holding, pumping. So we activate the pulse first with a sort of a yang movement, pressing, pumping, holding it, and it's already going bloop, 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 bloop. And then releasing. And all of a sudden, feeling warm and alive. Yeah, now the spleen is getting full of nourishment, which is what it most needs. Okay, so then we can also do it using the qi touch. So this was the more yang style to activate the pulse. And then now the microcirculation for the capillaries, they need a special kind of a touch where the pulse of your hand, the capillaries of your hand are going to go into resonance with the capillaries of the organ that you're touching. So this is going to be more like it's not visible so much, but it's like you need to get in touch using the yi, the intention, to connect with the blood flow. And allow now you just breathe a little bit in my hand. So now I'm going to ask Sabine to use her breath just a little bit, because the lungs and the heart are very connected, and so the lungs will help to pump the blood through the capillaries, just a little bit under my hand, and to direct the blood into the organ, into the capillaries. So we're using our intention to direct the blood, direct the qi where we need it. So between my hands, there's a real relationship. There's still a compression and a dilation. Compression, dilation. There's still a pumping happening between my hands. But it's just infinite. You don't see it necessarily, but it's with the qi. And so this is where the microcirculation gets activated. The capillary circulation. So this is the deepest circulation, actually. So the less you move, the more deep you go. But I'm not just resting my hand and doing nothing. There's a real relationship. My whole structure is involved. And I'm going into her spine, where the organs and the arteries are connected. They're attached. They're inserted in the spine. Okay, so now we're feeling there's more and more qi, more and more blood in this area. Okay, so this we did now for the spleen and stomach. We can do also for the liver, gallbladder. We can do also for the kidneys. Putting the hands underneath, activating the kidney pulses, which is very beneficial. We can do also for the small intestine, the mesenteric arteries, and the large intestine. And then, of course, the genitals, the pelvic area, using the pulse just above the navel. We can connect with the capillary flow and the organ pulses of the ovaries, the uterus, the bladder, the prostate. Using the same connection of getting to the root pulse of where the arteries of the organs are actually stemming out from the artery, the branch, I mean the root of where the blood is flowing from the heart. Okay, so that gives you a general idea of the many applications of this life pulse massage technique. You get the idea? Yes? Okay, good. So now I think you can work on yourselves a little bit. I think the easiest thing to start with is the naval pulse, because already with that you will feel a lot. So what you can do is lie down on your mat and do it for yourself first, and then we can help each other. We can do it 2 by 2 if you have a partner that you want to work with. It's also nice as a treatment to receive. So I will guide you. Thank you, Sabine. Merci. C'était super.